They asked me, could I identify him? Is he in this room? And it's obvious who's on trial, you know. And I told them no. I'm not 100% sure that that's him. No, I couldn't.
As you know, nobody identified me. 7 witnesses, nobody picked me out. Nobody in court said that's him. Everybody said, nah, I can't say it's him. 7 witnesses unable to identify. Nobody's never identified me in court.
This was not only an eyewitness identification case, but it was an eyewitness identification case where not a single person actually identified him in the courtroom, and where every single one who gave a description that didn't match him. You know, it described a shooter who was 6 inches to a foot shorter than the individual who was killed. Mr. Jones is 6 feet tall, and the POW, Mr. Rodriguez, is 6 feet 1. They're 1 inch apart. No one would have mistaken them for being substantially different in height.
The jury was hung. Let's not forget, the jury came back 3 times. The jury came back and said, hey, we can't decide. Hey, we don't reasonable doubt. Can we get that? The jury gave that judge and them all the opportunities he could to say, we can't convict this guy. You know what I mean? And then they just gave up.
There was more than me. There was a few others. I didn't believe he did it. I just was not convinced. That's why we went in and said we could not agree.
There was 3 or 4 that I remember. I think that at first it said it wasn't first-degree murder, and then there was a few. I know that because it did take a few days.
After we went and told the judge, and that he said, not in a very nice manner, you go back in there until you do agree. I think some of the people get scared.
I was always just offended that they gave up, you know what I mean? Whether it was an all-white jury or not, you know what I mean?
Was it an all-white jury?
Yeah, it's an all-white jury. They were all older people, you know what I mean? I was surprised, yeah, they were all older people.
No doubt at all, that man is guilty of murder in the first degree. There's no doubt in my mind, and I remember the weapon he used had 3 safeties on it, and he disconnected all 3 safeties to shoot that guy.
Little by little, people started changing their vote. The last day when I finally gave in, everybody else had, and when we went back out, I was crying and crying. I was a mess. I don't know why I changed my mind. I never should have. As I walked out into the courtroom again, I said, what am I doing? I just felt terrible. And then the judge came into the room afterwards and said, you did the right thing. You did the right thing. I didn't like the judge at all.
I've never seen such extreme evidence of conflict of interest with witnesses of such critical importance. Here you have a trial attorney who was representing 3 of the officers who were the key witnesses in the case and who were the only source of identification evidence.
He represented the police department since 1967, everybody. Never told me none of that until trial the 3rd day. 3rd day he said, Mr. Jones don't know any of this, but I also represent this cop that's testifying and the cop that just testified, and you know what I mean? It just sucked me in. I didn't know. I was like in shock. Like, what do you mean you represent all of them?
The fact that the trial attorney was involved in representing numerous of the lead investigators in the case, whose credibility was the centerpiece of the Commonwealth's evidence, that makes it extraordinary.
I've talked to several people who are just shocked that he was put 10 feet away from his attorney, that they've never heard of that.
One thing that happened in the case is that during the opening statement, the defense counsel basically told the jury that he's sitting there, I'm sitting here, that's my choice, that's how I like to work. And so you might say, well, doesn't that solve the problem? But I would say not at all, actually, because there's something so fundamental, I think, about the imagery of the client sitting next to a lawyer at a table, a unified front. So to have that separation signifies perhaps to the jury that the lawyer doesn't really believe the client. Maybe he's being forced into representing him and he doesn't really believe him or trust him. maybe he thinks he's guilty, right? So you can't really cure that, in my opinion, with any sort of statement in an opening statement, which is what occurred here.
I'm sitting, a car length away. I can't see everything they got up there. I didn't look at the gun. I wasn't paying attention, to be honest. I'm so near the back door. I didn't think I could get convicted. Just the bottom line. I was like, this is some BS. I'm going home. I'm talking to people back here because I'm just thinking like this is some BS. I'm so comfortable with it. I didn't think it could happen. I just didn't think it could happen. I never thought it could happen.
November
Terry Starks.
11th, 1985.
That's the only thing that got me convicted because nobody identified me. They used her tape to say that she's picking a picture of me, which we can't even see who she's picking. But they used that. When they couldn't get nobody else to say, they used that video.
Would this be the same guy, same man who came in with the young fella that night?
Yes, it is.
Indicating photograph of Darrell Diamond Jones.
I think the jury should never have seen that videotape. I think it was inherently unreliable. And I think without that videotape that Darrell would have been found not guilty in a heartbeat.
Right. Well, there's a lot about that videotape that's problematic, not the least of which is that when the video starts to run, there's a stack of photographs, 10 photographs, which are eventually laid out for Ms. Starks to view, sitting right in front of her. So it's pretty clear that before the video was ever started, she was looking through pictures, and there's a separate stack elsewhere on the table. So that alone probably, if it had been raised, might have meant that the jury never saw that video.
We've had two different experts determined that the police did what's commonly called a crash edit.
That man is singing. He was a blind.
At trial, the detective claimed that the way this interruption occurred was that he accidentally hit record while he was displaying the video to trial counsel. And there's this very puzzling moment in the trial where the officer is being voir dire, is being examined on the video and why it has this interruption, and he sort of looks to the trial attorney and says, "Don't you remember you were in my office and and this happened?" And the lawyer is completely bewildered. It's a moment of rare candor, I think, where the lawyer had absolutely no memory of this happening, and we think that's because it didn't happen. It did not happen that way. You rarely see such direct evidence of deliberate tampering with evidence. And I say deliberate, I don't know what was in the minds of the officers when this occurred, but what we do know from the expert analysis in the case is that it did not happen the way that they testified under oath it did.
If you know it's not you understand? That's like if I'm sitting here right now and the cop behind me came over and said, I found this gun over here in the back room, and I know I ain't been in the back room, and I know I ain't got no gun, then I know that's a setup. It's common sense to me. I know I don't got nothing to do with it, so that's a setup.
Why would they set you up?
Yeah, I don't know.
Mr. Jones's case seems like a particularly stark example of the kind of tunnel vision that I think does affect police investigations all the time. I think that for whatever reason, whether it was, as Mr. Jones believes, a setup or whether it was a mistaken, misguided focus on the wrong person, I do think that from the very beginning, they decided that they knew what happened, and they ignored the evidence that failed to fit within their picture.